National News Studio, Sri Lanka.
A pleasant evening and a very warm welcome to the National News of Rupavahini ChannelEye. I'm Dilanjali Anandam.
I'm Movin Hettiarachi, and today is the 16th of May, and here are today's headlines.
A dengue prevention program initiated targeting ordinary level examination centers. IMF mission in Sri Lanka says the macro framework of the government is progressing in line with the IMF program. Chief Prelate of Sri Lanka Amarapura Mahanikaya, Most Venerable Dodampahala Chandrasiri Thera, passes away. Steps taken to import 25,000 metric tons of urea fertilizer for paddy cultivation in Yala season. At least 6 dead in New Zealand hostel fire.
Now on to those and more stories in detail. On today's top story, International Monetary Fund mission in Sri Lanka says that the macro framework of the government is progressing in line with the IMF program so far.
Director of Asia Pacific Department at IMF Krishna Srinivasan said that the government has shown commitment towards the reform efforts proposed through the IMF program. The IMF mission also encouraged authorities to introduce a strategy to bring down the high domestic interest rates to restore stability. The IMF team shared these remarks during a media briefing held in Colombo yesterday.
So our macro framework is a dynamic exercise. So we keep updating that, and part of Peter's work during the mission will be to update the macro framework. In terms of progress with reforms and so on, we need to recognize the fact that before the program was tabled for discussion by the executive board of the IMF, there were certain prior actions, and all those prior actions were met by the authorities, which indicates a commitment to the reform effort. And beyond that, the progress will be evaluated by Peter during the mission in the next 10 days. So.
We will be looking at whether our macro framework is still appropriate or whether there have been such substantial changes that it requires revisions. At the moment, we sort of see things developing more or less in line with expectations. So this is again something that we will decide towards the end of the mission to what extent revisions are needed to the macro framework that you have seen.
Director of the IMF, Srinivasan, said that the Sri Lankan government has assured its commitment to treating their official bilateral and private creditors in uniformity.
So in terms of the debt treatment, again, the authorities have affirmed their commitment to have a uniformity of treatment. And how that is defined, is enforced, will be something which the creditors will be having a dialogue with the sovereign, which is in this case Sri Lanka. In terms of the progress with official creditors, what we know is that Japan, India and the Paris Club together, Japan's part of the Paris Club, have formed a creditor committee to discuss restructuring and so on, and China will be an observer. So that's what we know in terms of the creditor committee being formed, who's part of it and so on. Similarly, with the private creditors, the authorities have been engaging through their financial and legal advisors on restructuring strategies. And our role in all of this is to make sure that any kind of agreement before it's reached is consistent with restoring debt sustainability. That is our role. We don't get involved in defining the perimeter of the debt, the terms of restructuring, who's in, who's out, and so on and so forth. And the governance diagnostic is something which we've done for a few countries, and like you said, Sri Lanka is the first one in Asia. And this was done at the request of the authorities. The governance diagnostic exercise will identify key governance weaknesses and corruption vulnerabilities that are macroeconomically critical. And this will be across 6 key areas. The 6 key areas include fiscal governance, financial sector oversight, central bank governance, market regulations, rule of law, and AML safety. You know what AML safety is, right? It'll also assess the adequacy of the anti-corruption framework and policies. So that is the scope and focus of the governance diagnostic. It will be completed, or the report will be done by September, and it will lay out recommendations on what can be done to improve the governance framework and reduce corruption in the country, and that will be factored into our program going forward.
The IMF mission also made remarks over the interest rate on the IMF loan facility extended for Sri Lanka.
It's actually a floating interest rate, so it depends on how global interest rates evolve, and so we can only make projections based on overall projections. So we've estimated that over the lifetime of the loan for 4 years until the repayment taking place all the way up to 2037, it would average out to about 5%.
IMF resident representative for Sri Lanka, Sarwar Jahan, made comments regarding the potential brain drain taking place during the post-crisis recovery.
Brain drain has been a serious concern, especially for Sri Lanka. We learned that last year, over 300,000 people immigrated from Sri Lanka. We hope with the proper policies, especially the macroeconomic policies, many of those who have left the country will see again the potential of Sri Lanka and hopefully will decide to come back to this country to help its growth potential.
She also made remarks over the reforms pertaining to the state-owned corporations in the country.
In our program, we also look into the issues of SOEs. A lot of these SOEs are not profit-making and they have been drained on public finances. So in our program, as you will have seen, we do have a structural benchmark on cost recovery for both fuel and electricity pricing. And that is a continuous benchmark. That means throughout the 4 years of the program, these two SOEs will have to be cost recovery. In addition to that, there are other SOEs that are not profit-making, and we have looked into those too. And we have asked that there is a restructuring of their balance sheets. And these are some of the measures that we are looking into to help public finances in Sri Lanka.
In the meantime, GCE ordinary level examination is scheduled to be held from May 29 until June 8 in 3,568 examination centre. A dengue prevention program will be initiated targeting the school examination centres during the examination period. The Examination Commissioner General announced that the program will be initiated with the coordination of provincial and district health services directors under the guidance of Ministry of Education. Principals of the respective schools and the provincial and zonal education directors will also be involved in this program. Legal action has been taken against several individuals who had failed to destroy a dengue mosquito breeding place in Bogoan Talava. Dengue breeding places are also detected in close to 40 multi-day fishing vessels in Beruala Fisheries Harbour during the special inspection conducted by officials attached to the Coast Guard. Accordingly, steps were taken to file cases against 14 multi-day ship owners for violating the health guidelines.
The Met Department says showers or thunder showers will occur in several provinces in the country during the evening or night tomorrow. The department has indicated that the other parts of the country is expected to experience a rainless climate with high temperatures. Several spells of showers or thunder showers will occur in western, Sabaragamuwa, central and northwestern provinces and Galle and Mathura districts. Winds up to 30 to 40 kilometers per hour will prevail over north and eastern provinces as well as north central province. Showers or thunder showers will occur at several places in the sea areas off the coast extending from Puttlam to Mathura via Colombo and Galle. Wind speed may increase up to 35 to 40 kilometers per hour at times in the sea areas around the country. The Met Department has said that the sea areas around the country will be fairly rough at times. The seawater had gushed onto the mainland in Batiklo district due to the roughness in the sea areas around the Batiklo coast. With the overflowing of the Kirama-Ara river, residents in the surrounding areas have claimed crocodiles have surfaced along with the flood water. Many low-lying areas, houses and roads in the area have been inundated. 8,851 members belonging to 2,474 families in Mathura districts have been affected from floods. 34 divisions in the 8 districts have been impacted by the floods thus far. Accordingly, 10,055 individuals belonging to 2,511 families have been affected. The flood situation occurred in Hinidume area following the overflowing of the Ginganga. Accordingly, roads in Nagoda and Baddegama are still inundated from the floods. The water level in Castle Rig Reservoir has been increased by 15 feet due to the recent showers occurred in the western slopes of the Central Highland. The engineer in charge of the reservoir has said that the water level will further rise if the rainfall in encashment areas continues to persist. Irrigation Department says the flood situation, which had affected many parts of the country, will recede in the next 24 hours. But the cabinet spokesman, Minister Bandulu Gunawarddena, alleges that certain entities are attempting to stir conflicts among various ethnic and religious groups.
The minister, speaking at a media briefing held today to announce the cabinet decisions, said that the government is consistently committed to defeat such attempts. Minister Bandulu Gunawarddena said that the president emphasized that the country has transitioned into a peaceful country from the violence which prevailed a year ago. However, he said that certain entities are attempting to create ethnic and religious countries among communities. He said that the government reports have indicated that various groups are influencing the public through social media and other platforms. Therefore, the minister said the president has assured the cabinet of ministers that the government will take the necessary measures to ensure the national security and safeguards of the fundamental rights of people.
සමාජ මාධ්‍ය හරහා සහ වෙනත් විකල්ප කණ්ඩායම් මේ සඳහා උත්තේජකයන් සපයන බවත් රජයට වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඊටම ප්‍රවේශමෙන්
Minister also shared remarks over the strike action launched by the railway station masters recently. The minister said that the CID has commenced investigations against certain entities who also led strike action for allegedly misusing railway department resources. He said that the public opinion is to privatize the railway department if the operations continue to worsen.
Parliamentarian Partli Champika Ranawaka says a new political front will be launched in Colombo on May 22nd. He made these remarks while speaking to the media in Kandy. MP Partli Champika Ranawaka called on Chief Prelate of Malwatta Chapter, Most Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Sumangala Thera, and invoked blessings. He also met with Deputy Chief Prelate of Malwatta Chapter, Venerable Dibulkumure Vimala Dhamma Thera. The parliamentarian said that the new political front will be launched on Republic Day, May 22nd, under the name United Republic Front. Accordingly, he said that he called on the terrorists to brief them about the new political front and invite them for the launching ceremony.
Samagi Janabalawegya parliamentarian Vadivel Suresh says that he will extend his support to the president on behalf of the state communities. Speaking at a media briefing held in Colombo today, the parliamentarian said that he decided to extend his support, not a favour or a post or privileges. Samagi Janabalawegya parliamentarian Vadivel Suresh said that he met with the president as a trade union leader. He said that the president has fulfilled all the requests he made on behalf of the upcountry communities. He also said that both opposition leader Sajith Premadasa and President Ranil Wickremesinghe should join hands considering the present situation in the country. Chief Prelate of the Sri Lanka Amarapura Mahanikaya, Most Venerable Dodam Pahala Chandrasiri Thera, passed away at Sri Lanka Jayawardena Hospital today.
The late Thera was 83 years of age at his demise. The Most Venerable Thera, who was residing at the Kalapavawa Gautama Tapovana Vihara in Rajagiriya, was admitted to Sri Jayawardena Hospital this morning due to a sudden illness. The Most Venerable Thera passed away while receiving treatments. Born on December 20th, 1939 in Dodampahala village in Hambantota, the Thera entered into priesthood on November 25th, 1950 as Venerable Dodampahala Chandrasiri. Subsequently, he continued to pursue Dhamma under the Kalyani Vangshika Nikaya as an ordained bhikkhu. In 1982, the late Thera was elevated to the chief guardian of the Gautama Tapovana Vihara in Kalapaluva. Then the Thera was appointed as the Mahanayaka of the Kalyani Vangshika Mahanikaya on March 31st, 1996. Later on, the Thera was elevated to Chief Prelate of Sri Lanka Amarapura Mahanikaya following the demise of the Chief Prelate of the Nikaya Agga Mahapandita Most Venerable Kotukuda Dhammavasa Thera. The late Most Venerable Thera had extended an immense service towards the religious and national rejuvenation in the country and carried out Dhamma propagations in many countries around the world. The remains of the late Most Venerable Dodampahala Chandrasiri Thera were taken to a private funeral parlour in Colombo from Sri Jayawardena Hospital this evening. The details of the funeral ceremony will be notified later. We'll be back with more news from home after this break.
Kutumi, Fantamai!
Welcome back. On World News from Home, the pricing committee granted approval to reduce the price of MOP fertilizer by 4,500 rupees for the Yala season.
Minister Mahinda Amaravira said that the relevant decision was reached with the aim to reduce the costs pertaining to farmer products. The state-owned fertilizer sold a 50 kilogram of MOP fertilizer at a rate of 19,500 rupees during the last Maha season. Also, the private sector sold a bag of MOP fertilizer at a rate of 22,500 rupees. Accordingly, the pricing committee has decided to reduce the price by 4,500 rupees and the new price is 15,000 rupees. The Ministry of Agriculture said that the necessary facilities have been arranged to obtain MOP fertilizer under the new rates through all agrarian service centres from yesterday.
Media spokesman of the Archdiocese of Colombo, Reverend Father Sri Gamini Fernando, shared comments over the recent statement of Pastor Jerome Fernando during a media briefing today. Media spokesman of the Archdiocese of Colombo, Reverend Father Sri Gamini Fernando, said that the religious harmony in the country has been threatened due to a statement made by a certain individual named Jerome Fernando. He emphasized that this individual is not a Catholic priest and has no connection to the Catholic Church. He also said that information over his alleged links with various foreign nationals and behavioral attributes are unveiling on social media at present. However, he said that the authorities have failed to probe in this regard.
A decision has been reached to import 25,000 metric tons of urea fertilizer for the cultivation of paddy in the Yala season. The Cabinet of Ministers granted the approval for the proposal tabled by Minister Mahinda Amaravira. The decision was reached to import fertilizer quantity after considering the available stocks of fertilizer in agrarian service centres and fertilizer stocks available with the state-owned fertilizer companies and the private sector. Accordingly, Ceylon Fertilizers Company is expected to import 60% of the fertilizer requirement, while Colombo Commercial Fertilizer Company Limited will import 40% of the requirement. The cabinet approval was granted to declare the song Danno Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda as a national heritage. The relevant resolution was tabled by the Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena. The song was written in 1903 by Sri Lankan playwright John De Silva and it is included in Sri Sangabo Nurti. The decision was reached to declare the song as a national heritage considering the continuous influence of the song towards the thinking of the nation. Cabinet of Ministers granted approval to extend the period considering the remittance of foreign exchange by the Sri Lankans engaged in overseas employment to obtain fully electric vehicles permit up till September 15th. The approval was earlier granted to implement the scheme to issue free permit for migrant workers during the period from May 1st to December 31st of last year. Accordingly, a decision was reached to extend the workers not eligible to import the electric vehicles according to their desire with foreign exchange amount they have remitted during this previous period. Cabinet approval was also granted to hold an industrial exhibition week annually with the aim to promote, encourage and uplift local industries as well as to attract foreign investors. This year's exhibition will be held from June 22nd to 25th.
Japan extends more than $4.6 million to strengthen the production capacity of smallholder paddy farmers in Sri Lanka. The relevant financial assistance has been extended through the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Smallholder farmers are amongst the most vulnerable rural communities, predominantly cultivating rice for self-consumption. Through the initiative, approximately 250,000 smallholder paddy farmers cultivating paddy on land holding up to 1 hectare in identified districts will receive up to 50 kilograms of urea fertilizer each for the upcoming Maha cropping season. The fertilizer will be provided free of cost and distribution will be carried out with the support of the Ministry of Agriculture and the Department of Agrarian Development. The project will also provide smallholder paddy farmers with sensitization material on the efficient use of fertilizer to maximize production. Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, Mizukoshi Hideaki, said that Japan has decided to provide additional humanitarian assistance to procure fertilizer, ensuring better livelihoods for smallholder farmers and stable access to essential food for all citizens across the country.
Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Myanmar, Janaka Bandara, held a meeting with the top management of Myanmar Airways International recently with a view of establishing a direct air connectivity between Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Chairman Ang Zaw and the Chief Commercial Officer Tanis Kumar represented Myanmar Airways International in the discussion. The ambassador highlighted the significance of direct air connectivity in promoting tourism industries of both destinations. In this discussion, the ambassador requested to establish a regular charter flight between Yangon and Colombo and to propose to extend the Yangon and Chennai flight up to Colombo. The Chief Commercial Officer, Tanis Kumar, agreed to see the possibility of arranging a charter flights between Yangon and Colombo during the month of August, enabling Myanmar pilgrims to visit Kandy to pay homage to Sri Ladala Maligava and experience the Esala Perahera. The proposal to establish direct air connectivity between Sri Lanka and Myanmar had been discussed in many high-level forums in both countries.
State Minister Pramita Bandarathinakon says that Sri Lanka military will be right-sized gradually and will be set up for their classic role subsequently. He made these remarks during a cordial discussion held with Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs of the U.S. Department of State, Afreen Afkar. Responding to steps taken concerning defense reforms, he expressed these remarks to Deputy Assistant Secretary Akhtar during a meeting held at his office in Colombo yesterday. Recalling supportive measures extended by the U.S. government, State Minister Thinnakun also discussed avenues accessible to strengthen military-to-military and further defense cooperation between the two countries. The fruitful bilateral discussion also included U.S. efforts to assist Sri Lanka in enhancing maritime domain awareness and maritime security and Sri Lanka's efforts to put forward maritime security and other regional issues in the defense policy. The State Minister was keen on avenues available for armed forces personnel to engage in the overseas mission during the session. Ensuring the discussion, Deputy Assistant Secretary Akhtar presented a memento to State Minister Thinnakun as a symbolic gesture and to mark the fruitful discussion.
Minister Manusha Karan has taken steps to initiate a housing project exclusively for expatriate workers. This housing project is to be implemented jointly by Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment and the Housing Development Authority. According to the needs of expatriate workers, this housing project is going to be implemented as urban condominiums and rural single housing projects. A discussion regarding this was held today with the participation of State Minister Thenukar Vidanagamage. During the meeting, it was decided to start a survey regarding the housing needs of expatriate workers from the next Monday onwards. The survey is scheduled to be conducted through development officers assigned to all divisional secretariat, Sri Lankan foreign missions and through official website of the Sri Lankan Bureau of Foreign Employment. After analysing data obtained from expatriate workers and their family members, the number of houses and the areas where the houses will be built will be identified. Construction work of the housing project will be implemented subsequently.
The first Sri Lankan woman to introduce the Indian Bharatanatyam classical dancing form to Sri Lankan, veteran artist Kalashuri Padmini Mana Dahanayaka Aryadasa has passed away. She was 81 years of age at her demise. She was the most senior Bharatanatyam artist in Sri Lanka. Born on March 8, 1942, she showed an exemplary talent towards dancing since her younger days. She pursued the art of Bharatanatyam under Indian veteran artist Rukmini Arundel. She had assumed Bharatanatyam instructress position in many schools in Sri Lanka and also served as an external lecturer for Haywood Art School. She had appeared in several films including Sadasulang and Daruwa Kageda and also worked as a choreographer for many Sinhala films. The remains of late artist Padmini Dahanayaka Aryadasa will be kept at the private funeral parlour in Colombo tomorrow. The final rites will be held at the Boralo Cemetery on the 18th at 5 p.m. We'll be back with international news after this break.
Prima Katumi Fantamai.
Welcome back. On foreign news, at least 6 people have died and others remain unaccounted for following a fire in a hostel in New Zealand, Prime Minister has told local media. Emergency services were called to the 4-story Loafers Lodge hostel in Wellington just after midnight yesterday. More than 50 people were rescued from the building, but police said 11 people remain unaccounted for. PM Chris Hipkins warned the number of dead was likely to increase. Police added that they could not be more specific on the number of deaths until they could access the building.
The Ukrainian capital, Kiev, has been subjected to an air attack by Russia, described by one official as exceptional intensity. At least 3 people were injured in the barrage, which used both drones and missiles. Video on social media showed air defense systems shooting down missiles all over the city. Russia has stepped up its air campaign in recent weeks ahead of an expected Ukrainian offensive in the south. The air raid alert sounded around 11:30 p.m. yesterday and was lifted 2 hours later in the 8th attack to hit the capital this month. The head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Valery Zaluzhin, said that the Russia attacked Kiev from north, south and east, and 18 air and sea and land-based missiles had been used. He added that all missiles were shot down by Ukraine. The head of the Ukrainian capital's military administration of Ukraine described the barrage as being the maximum number of attack missiles in the shorter period of time. Kiev residents were warned to keep away from windows and debris from intercepted missiles which fell from the sky. Mayor of the city said the rocket debris had fallen to the central district, including the city's zoo. Zolomsky district, which includes the international airport, is reported to have been hit the hardest hit.
Turkey's powerful president Recep Tayyip Erdogan will go head to head with his opposition rival in a runoff vote, the Supreme Election Council has confirmed. Erdogan led the first round with 49.51% of the vote, its chairman said, although he had a clear lead over his main challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who polled 44.88%. He needed more than half the vote to win the race outright. A second round will go ahead on 28th May with Mr. Erdogan the clear favorite.
A university professor in the United States broke the record for the longest time living underwater without depressurization this weekend at Florida Keys Lodge for scuba divers. Joseph Dituri's 74th day residing in Jules Undersea Lodge, situated in the bottom of the 9-meter-deep Lagoon Key Lago, wasn't much different than his previous days there since he submerged on March 1st. Dituri, who also goes by the moniker Dr. Deep Sea, ate a protein-heavy meal of eggs and salmon prepared by using a microwave, exercised with resistant bands, and did his daily push-ups and took an hour-long nap. Unlike a submarine, the lodge does not use technology to adjust for the increased underwater pressure. His previous record of 73 days, 2 hours and 34 minutes was set by two Tennessee professors, Bruce Carnell and Jessica Fain, at the same location in 2014.
Prima Katumi Fantamai.
Welcome back on your sports news. The Sri Lanka cricket has accepted
The Sri Lanka cricket has accepted the regulation published in 2 Gazette notifications issued by the Minister of Sports on December 14th last year. Accordingly, elections of the Sri Lanka cricket is scheduled to be held on May 20th as per previous regulations. The regulation in the Gazette notification issued by the Sports Minister will come into effect from August 1st. According to the Sri Lanka Cricket Constitution, the new board selected from the election is scheduled on the May 20th will be able to continue their term, discounting the new regulations.
Prima Katumi Fantamai.
And that's all the news we have for tonight. Join us tomorrow at the very same time for the latest on Channel Eye. I'm Delanjali, together with Urin, signing